Sometimes the biggest secrets aren't buried in old journals, they're hidden inside families. Imagine discovering that everything you've believed about your parents, your childhood, even your own identity, was carefully constructed to protect you from a truth no one wanted you to uncover. Now imagine inheriting an isolated island where every person you meet seems to know more about your family than you do. That's exactly what happens in Sterling Point, Prime Video's coming-of-age mystery drama that blends romance, family secrets, and emotional discovery into one unforgettable summer. At first glance, it feels like another dreamy YA series. Beautiful lakes, charming cabins, summer parties, love triangles. But beneath its peaceful setting lies a mystery that grows darker with every episode, and by the time the truth finally comes out, nothing is the same. Created by Megan Park, Sterling Point isn't just another teen romance. Instead, it's a story about identity, about grief, about the families we're born into and the families we choose. The series follows Annie Jacobson, a brilliant 17-year-old who believes she has every detail of her future planned. She's organized, disciplined, always chasing the next achievement. Her dream is simple: get accepted into a prestigious business program, build the perfect resume, and eventually earn a place at one of America's top universities. Her entire life revolves around preparation, control, perfection. But life rarely follows a perfect plan. When Annie receives the devastating news that she's been rejected from the program she's worked toward for years, her carefully constructed future begins to crumble. For someone who measures success through planning, this feels like failure. Yet she has no idea that this rejection is actually the first step toward discovering who she really is. Only hours later, another unexpected event changes everything. An attorney arrives with news that Annie's estranged grandfather has passed away. This wouldn't normally mean much. After all, Annie barely knew the man. Her father rarely spoke about him. His name was almost never mentioned inside the family home. But the inheritance changes everything. Annie and her twin brother Connor have inherited a remote island property in Canada's Muskoka region, a place called Sterling Point. Immediately, something feels wrong. Their father becomes uncomfortable. Questions are avoided. Old letters are hidden away. And instead of encouraging their children to learn about their grandfather, he does everything possible to keep the past locked away. That's the first major clue. Sometimes what parents refuse to talk about tells us more than what they actually say. What makes Sterling Point so fascinating isn't simply that it's an island. It's what the island represents. Away from New York's endless schedules and expectations, Annie suddenly enters a completely different world. There's barely any phone signal, people know one another by name, days are measured by sunsets instead of calendars, nature replaces technology. It's almost like stepping into another era. But this peaceful setting hides emotional scars stretching back decades. Every cabin, every dock, every familiar face holds another piece of Annie's family history. She just doesn't know it yet. As Annie begins exploring the island, she meets a close-knit group of young locals. Each of them seems welcoming. Each of them has their own complicated past. Some become close friends. Others become potential romances. But perhaps most importantly, every one of them knows something Annie doesn't. That's what makes the early episodes so compelling. Rather than rushing through the mystery, the show slowly allows Annie and the audience to discover the island one conversation at a time. The biggest strength of Sterling Point isn't explosive action, it's curiosity. Every answer creates two new questions. Every revelation makes the past even more mysterious. And before Annie can fully understand why her grandfather left her this place, she encounters someone whose very existence changes everything. A young woman living on the island claims the same grandfather. For Annie, it's impossible. For the audience, it's the moment the real story finally begins. Because if they're both telling the truth, then someone has been hiding the biggest secret of all. What starts as an unexpected inheritance quickly becomes a search for identity. The island isn't just revealing Annie's family history, it's forcing every character to confront the lies they've been living with for years. And as old relationships begin to crack, new ones are formed that will change everyone's future. But what happens next uncovers a family secret no one, not even Annie, is prepared to face.
Up to this point, Annie believes she's simply uncovering forgotten pieces of her family's history. But what happens next changes everything. Because the mystery is no longer about an old inheritance. It's about discovering that every adult in her life has been protecting a different version of the truth, and those truths don't always agree. One of the smartest decisions Sterling Point makes is slowing the pace after its opening mystery. Instead of rushing toward answers, the series shifts its attention to the people living on the island. At first, that might seem like a detour, but it's actually where the emotional heart of the story begins. Every new friendship gives Annie another perspective on the family she never really knew. Some characters remember her grandfather with admiration, others remember him with regret, and some avoid talking about him altogether. That contrast is important. It reminds us that no person leaves behind just one legacy. Everyone carries a different memory. The island itself almost becomes another character. Unlike Annie's carefully scheduled life in New York, everything here feels unpredictable. People spend more time talking than texting. Conversations happen on docks, around campfires, or while crossing the lake. The lack of constant technology forces the characters to deal with emotions they've spent years avoiding. It's a refreshing change from many modern teen dramas. Instead of endless social media conflicts, the tension comes from real conversations and uncomfortable silences. As Annie becomes more comfortable on Sterling Point, another conflict quietly begins to grow. She starts asking questions, simple questions, questions that should have easy answers. But every answer she receives feels incomplete. Adults hesitate. Friends exchange nervous looks. Stories don't quite line up. Little by little, Annie realizes that everyone knows a piece of the puzzle, but nobody knows the whole picture. Or perhaps they simply don't want her to know. Meanwhile, the relationships forming around Annie become increasingly complicated. Without focusing only on romance, the series uses these connections to show how much Annie herself is changing. Early in the story, she approaches life like a checklist. Every decision has a correct answer. Every problem has a logical solution. But the island doesn't work that way. Feelings aren't logical. Family isn't logical. Grief certainly isn't logical. That lesson becomes one of the biggest turning points in Annie's emotional journey. Another standout element is the relationship between Annie and Ramona. What begins with suspicion slowly transforms into something far more layered. Neither girl fully understands the other's life. Both carry emotional wounds. Both feel abandoned in different ways. And both are trying to understand a mother whose choices continue affecting everyone long after she's gone. Rather than presenting either character as completely right or wrong, the series lets them make mistakes. They misunderstand each other. They argue. They pull away. Then they slowly rebuild trust. That gradual evolution makes their relationship feel genuine. At the same time, the adults become just as fascinating. What initially appears to be secrecy for the sake of drama slowly reveals itself as something much more human. Many of the older characters genuinely believe they're protecting the younger generation. The problem is that every secret creates another. Every lie requires another lie to support it. Eventually, the weight becomes impossible to carry. That's one of the show's strongest themes. Sometimes people don't lie because they're cruel. They lie because they believe the truth will hurt someone they love. Ironically, those same lies often create even greater pain. As the season progresses, questions surrounding Sterling Point itself become increasingly important. Who truly belongs there? Who has the right to decide its future? Is it simply valuable land? Or is it something much more meaningful? For Annie, the island slowly transforms from an inheritance into a symbol. It's the first place where she isn't defined by grades, expectations, or carefully planned goals. For perhaps the first time in her life, she's discovering who she is without constantly trying to impress someone else. And just when it seems Annie is finally beginning to understand her family's history, another revelation completely changes the direction of the story. New information forces everyone to question relationships they thought they understood. Old assumptions begin to collapse, and long-hidden truths start surfacing one after another. By now, it becomes clear that this isn't simply a mystery about the past. It's about how the past continues shaping every decision these characters make today. The closer Annie gets to the truth, the more unstable everything becomes. Friendships are tested, families begin to fracture, and one shocking revelation forces everyone to reconsider what family really means. Because the biggest secret of Sterling Point isn't who inherited the island, it's who truly belongs together. By the midpoint of Sterling Point, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. This was never just a mystery about an inherited island. It was always a mystery about identity. Every new revelation strips away another layer of the stories these characters have believed for years, forcing them to ask one difficult question. Who am I when the story I've been told about my life turns out to be incomplete? One of the series' greatest strengths is how it treats its biggest revelations. Instead of presenting them as shocking twists for the sake of surprise, each discovery forces the characters to reevaluate their relationships. A secret doesn't just change the past, it changes the present. Suddenly, conversations carry different meanings. Old memories are viewed from a new perspective, and even acts of love begin to look more complicated than they first appeared. The adults aren't portrayed as villains. They're portrayed as people who made impossible choices and then spent years living with the consequences. That moral gray area gives the story emotional weight.
Annie's journey is especially compelling because she's forced to abandon something she's depended on her entire life: certainty. At the beginning of the series, she believes every problem has a solution if she works hard enough. By this point, she's learning that some questions don't have clean answers. You can discover the truth and still be left with pain. You can finally understand someone's choices and still disagree with them. That's an emotional maturity many coming-of-age stories never explore. Ramona's arc mirrors Annie's in fascinating ways. Both young women are searching for belonging, but they start from opposite directions. One grows up surrounded by structure but lacking answers. The other grows up surrounded by memories but missing stability. As their relationship evolves, they stop seeing each other as rivals and begin recognizing that they're carrying different pieces of the same emotional burden. That's what makes their connection so effective. They're not simply learning about each other. They're helping each other become whole. Another theme quietly running beneath the surface is forgiveness. The show never suggests forgiveness is easy, nor does it imply everyone deserves it. Instead, it asks whether holding on to anger can prevent people from moving forward. Several characters become trapped by guilt. Others become trapped by regret. Some spend years trying to protect people they love, only to realize those protections have become emotional prisons. It's a surprisingly mature idea for a young adult drama. Visually, the series reinforces these ideas through its setting. The island isn't merely beautiful scenery, it's symbolic. Away from busy city life, the characters can't hide behind routines or distractions. Every dock, every shoreline, every quiet evening creates space for difficult conversations. The natural world almost demands honesty, and that's exactly what the story requires, because once the truth begins surfacing, there's no going back. The romances also become more meaningful at this stage. Rather than existing simply to create love triangles, they're used to highlight emotional growth. Every relationship asks a different question. Do we choose people because they remind us of who we used to be, or because they help us become someone new? That distinction becomes increasingly important as Annie's understanding of herself changes. Without giving away every detail, the emotional choices she faces become just as significant as the family mystery itself. Of course, not everything lands perfectly. Some viewers felt certain supporting characters deserved more development. Others wanted the central mystery to move faster. A few subplots appear only briefly before the story shifts focus again. But even when the pacing slows, the emotional core remains surprisingly strong. That's largely because Megan Park understands something many YA dramas forget. Teenagers don't experience emotions in small ways. For them, every friendship feels permanent. Every betrayal feels enormous. Every summer feels like it could define the rest of their lives. The series captures that intensity without turning every moment into melodrama. As the season races towards its conclusion, the emotional stakes become much bigger than uncovering hidden family history. Now the real question is whether these characters can build healthier relationships than the generation before them. Can honesty finally replace secrecy? Can understanding replace resentment? And perhaps most importantly, can someone truly move forward without first making peace with the past? The finale doesn't simply answer the mystery. It asks what those answers actually mean. Because discovering the truth is only the beginning. Living with it, that's the real challenge.
By the time Sterling Point reaches its finale, the biggest mystery has already been uncovered. But surprisingly, that's not what the ending is really about, because this story was never trying to answer one simple question. Instead, it asks something much bigger. What truly makes a family? Throughout the series, Annie believes that finding the truth will solve everything. If she can uncover the missing pieces, if she can finally understand her mother's past, then maybe her own life will finally make sense. But the finale reminds us that real life doesn't work like a mystery novel. Truth doesn't erase pain. It simply gives people the chance to move forward honestly. That's a much more mature message than many coming-of-age dramas attempt. One of the strongest aspects of the ending is how it avoids creating clear heroes and villains. Almost every adult character has made mistakes. Some chose silence. Some chose distance. Others believed they were protecting the people they loved. Were those decisions always right? No. But the series argues that love and failure often exist together. People can hurt those closest to them while genuinely believing they're doing the right thing. That's what makes the emotional conflict feel so believable. Annie's transformation is perhaps the clearest example of this idea. Compare the girl we meet in the opening episode with the person she becomes by the finale. At the beginning, her identity revolves around achievement. Every plan is carefully organized. Every future goal is mapped out. Control gives her comfort. But Sterling Point slowly strips away that illusion. The island teaches her that life can't always be scheduled. Sometimes the most important discoveries happen when everything goes wrong. By the end, Annie isn't simply chasing success anymore. She's searching for something far more meaningful, a place where she feels she belongs. Ramona's journey is equally powerful. Without revealing every detail, her story explores how identity isn't defined by a single revelation. Learning new truths about your family doesn't instantly answer every question about yourself. Instead, it creates new ones. Who do you become after your entire understanding of your past changes? How much of who you are comes from biology, and how much comes from the people who raised you? The series never pretends those questions have simple answers. Instead, it encourages viewers to sit with the uncertainty. Then there's Sterling Point itself. By the end of the season, it's clear the island represents much more than property. It becomes a symbol of memory, healing, second chances. For some characters, it's a reminder of painful choices. For others, it's the first place they've ever felt accepted. That's why debates surrounding the island carry so much emotional weight. It's never just about ownership. It's about deciding what parts of the past deserve to be preserved and what parts need to be left behind. The ending also leaves several doors open for a possible second season. Without focusing on specific unresolved plot points, it's clear that many relationships have entered entirely new chapters rather than reaching neat conclusions. That's actually one of the show's strengths. Instead of wrapping everything up with perfect certainty, it acknowledges that growing up is an ongoing process. Life doesn't end when one mystery is solved. It simply presents another. Of course, the series isn't perfect. Some viewers wanted faster pacing. Others hoped certain supporting characters would receive more development. A few storylines feel like they deserved additional screen time. Those criticisms are understandable. Yet, despite those imperfections, Sterling Point succeeds where it matters most. It creates characters who feel emotionally real, people who make messy decisions, people who misunderstand one another, people who hurt each other, and sometimes find the courage to heal. That's why the story resonates long after the credits roll. So, is Sterling Point the next The Summer I Turned Pretty? Not exactly. Both share beautiful summer settings, young romance, and emotional coming-of-age journeys. But Sterling Point is ultimately less interested in asking, who will end up together? Instead, it asks, who are we when the stories we've believed about ourselves fall apart? And that's a far more enduring question. Whether you connected most with Annie's search for identity, Ramona's emotional journey, or simply fell in love with the quiet beauty of the island itself, Sterling Point offers more than a typical YA romance. Beneath the stunning scenery and summer nostalgia is a thoughtful exploration of family, forgiveness, and finding the courage to embrace an uncertain future. Now it's your turn. What was your favorite moment from the series? Which character's journey affected you the most? And if the show returns for another season, what questions do you hope it answers next?